Welcome, everyone, to the Global Legacy of Scientific Innovation and Impact in honor of Diana Wall. My name is Dennis Ojima, Interim Director of the Natural Resource Ecology Lab. And it's my pleasure to introduce Courtney Schultz, who's co-hosting this event from the School of Global Environmental Sustainability for some opening remarks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Again, I'm Courtney Schultz. I'm the director of the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. We're here today to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Diana Wall, both personally and professionally. As you know, Diana passed away last year, and I have the honor of succeeding her in the role as director and also the great responsibility of preserving and building upon her legacy in the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. Diana was an amazing inspiration to so many of us as women scientists and also for people in the field of environment and sustainability. She was the inaugural director of SOGIS, and before that, where she served from 2008 when it started until 2024 when she passed away. Before that, she also had a long career at CSU. She was a professor of biology. She served as the director of the Natural Resource Ecology Laboratory. She was also the associate dean in the Warner College of Natural Resources. And she was a university distinguished professor, which is our highest honor and rank for scholarship and academics at CSU. Diana was a world-renowned soil ecologist and champion for soil biodiversity. She had a particular passion for her work with nematodes in Antarctica and amazingly went every year for 30 years to Antarctica and has a valley in Antarctica named after her. She also contributed in all kinds of amazing ways to science around soil biodiversity in other arid regions and in tropical regions around the world. She also was an enormous champion for women in science and a leader among leaders. I know she was an inspiration to so many of us here at CSU, but she also served in incredible leadership positions in a lot of professional societies. For example, serving as the president of the American Institute of Biological Sciences and also the Ecological Society of America. And I just think it's an incredible testament to her commitment to translating science into policy processes and communicating it to policymakers. And that's a legacy that she really left here at CSU as well. Really, one tremendous thing about Diana that I want to leave you with is that she essentially left her life savings, $1.5 million, to go to graduate fellowships for students in ecology and also to create an enduring endowment for the Sustainability Leadership Fellows Program, which trains PhD students and postdoctoral students in all kinds of aspects of transdisciplinarity, communicating science across teams and also to different audiences. So it's just an amazing legacy, and I think communicates her deep commitment to science and to mentoring the next generation. You're going to hear a lot more about Diana today from our participants. We've put together people from across different eras and areas of her career to highlight her tremendous contributions to soil ecology and science more broadly. Thanks so much for being here today and celebrating her work with us. And I'll turn it back over to Dennis Ojima, who's going to be moderating today.
Welcome to you and to those on online. It's really a great pleasure to moderate this panel. I want to first thank the organizing committee that was chaired by Peter Backlund and had Kathy Galvin, John Moore, Mindy Smith, and Leanna Villanen on the committee, including myself, and really putting together this really great group of speakers, researchers and friends of Diana Wall. I mean, in addition, this committee was really challenged by really looking at the arc of Diana's impact to science in the world and really trying to pull in the various facets of her career and her influences both on the world and international scene, but also to CSU and how she brought the world to CSU in a way that we became recognized as leaders in research, science, and biodiversity research. So the set of speakers that we invited are really kind of equally challenged because, she had such a broad impact, but yet we're just going to see some snippets in a facet of her amazing contributions. Our first speaker is going to be online. This is Wim van der Putten. He's a professor in the Netherlands, part of the Center for Soil Biology, and really helped initiate the global soil biodiversity initiative. So with that, let me turn the floor over to Wim.
Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me? Then I will try to share my screen. So now I think you should allow me to share my screen. Okay. I have to say, after COVID, during COVID, it went really fast, the share of screen. Can you see it now? Okay, I should be on full screen. If someone can give me thumbs up. Okay, let me just start. And I will get a warning, I guess. Someone should jump in front of the speaker chair and say that it's not going well, then I can see that. If not, thank you for inviting me.
We're having trouble seeing your slides.
Ah, you don't see my slides. Because I am sharing the screen. I will stop sharing now, and I will do it again.
Do we have a copy of the slides? Then why don't you put those up and he could just tell you when to advance.
Can you see it now?
The slides are up now. You might have to, I think we're going to manually advance them for you here.
Yes, that is needed because I can't advance them myself. Okay. I'm very sorry not to be with you this afternoon. I would have loved to be there, but I couldn't for some reasons. Let me quickly introduce myself and how I got to know Diana. So my name is Wim van der Putten, and I'm working at the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, and I'm also linked to Wageningen University. And during my research, I became involved in work on nematodes, and that's how I knew Diana from the literature. But I have never met her. I had never met her in person until the end 1990s, when she was in Wageningen to chair a scope workshop. And I heard about that, and I asked if I could meet her. So I was allowed to join the meeting for lunch. And probably like everybody who has met her, I was completely flabbergasted about so much energy and liveliness. And since then, we started to communicate, work together, and actually that at some stage resulted in the setting up of the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. And this is what I'm going to talk about. And now, can I, well, So the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative was set up in 2011, and it was a grassroots organization. And we wanted to mobilize the global soil biodiversity community to make a concerted effort in order to get this type of knowledge used in all kinds of global policy and also in application. Can I see the next slide? So someone should manually help me because I can't move on.
We have the slide up with you and Johan Six and Diana Wall.
Oh gosh, and I'm just getting stuck in my slide, in the first slide. So
So we need the third slide. This next slide. No, that's the first, second, third, that right there.
because if I don't see the slide, I don't know which one is on and what I'm talking about. Ah, that's better. Okay, thank you. So in 2000, I just went back to how it all started with the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative. And it started actually in 2011 at the Wageningen Soil Conference, I thought. But in any case, we announced that we had set up the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative during that conference. And in my memory, we got fed up a bit by, sorry for the people who are working in that field, by all the soil physics and chemistry that was presented during that first conference. And we thought we have to do something. So with Diana, Luca Montanarella, Johan Six, and Richard Bargett, we went to my office. And this is what I remember with the bang of Diana's fist on the table. She said, okay, let's do it. And so then the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative was initiated. But then I found another document, which is on the next slide. And that were the minutes of a meeting that we had in my office. So I really have difficulties in seeing which slide is the next one. Can I stop sharing my presentation, that you drive the presentation from your side, and that then I can just put it on my own screen here? Because else I don't know. Ah, yeah, good. Sorry for this. So then, but then when I was preparing this presentation, I found another piece, which was actually a week earlier, September 13th. And if it's okay, now you see an agenda where we had a meeting in my place, Netherlands Institute of Ecology, September the 13th. And there we spoke about soil-borne diseases. And I know that, well, I invited Diana also to join this discussion group, because I knew that she has been working in that field, at least she had interest. But then the second point of the agenda was the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative meeting. And I was quite stunned, because apparently we were talking about that a week earlier, or maybe even several weeks earlier. And then we got it established during the Wageningen Soil Conference. So can I see the next slide? Yeah. So, and then things went really fast. So we established this grassroots organization, and we said, okay, we are going to bring together all the soil biodiversity people worldwide, but we are going to do it in a way that we are not being funded by anyone. So we wanted to be completely independent. So very soon after Diana went back to CSU, she had she had an office organized with herself as a scientific chair. And well, here you see the current executive director, Lina Vilonen. But in those days, it was Kelly Ramirez. And we were all, Richard and Johan and myself, were flabbergasted that things went so fast, because every time when we looked in our email, Diana has just started and initiated another series of events. Can I go to the next slide? So that is the situation that went on until last year, March 25th, or a bit later. And then all of a sudden, Diana was gone. And so we were all in a shock and said, okay, at least form a troika to support Lina in keeping GSBI going on, because there were so many things going on and so many things to take care of. And so from then on, we sort of were in the lead of the GSBI until now. So in the mid, you see Johan Six, very well known in Fort Collins, and Richard Bargett, also very well known. So on the next slide, so besides us being sort of a core team, there were also scientific advisory committee members. Fred Ayuke from Kenya, Shio Gadi from Italy, Nobuhiro Kaneko from Japan, and Fatima Moreira from Brazil. So we tried to have sort of a global coverage without making the whole thing too big. On the next slide, please. What was really important for getting GSBI off the ground, besides all the energy that Diana put in it, were the executive directors. And the first, who is also going to speak today, Kelly Ramirez, she really set up everything very, very fast and efficiently. So there was a website, there were emails, communications, and so. And so Kelly really got the whole thing going in the first 3 years that she was appointed as executive director. Then she was succeeded by Tendra Fraser, then Elizabeth Bach, Carl Webkin, Monica Farfan, and at this moment, Lina Vilonen. Next slide, please. So then things went very fast. So we came together in March in London, and this group of people was discussing how to give the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative more exposure. And you see, maybe you recognize, for example, Leibert Broussard on the right hand. There's Diana in the middle, Richard Bargett and myself at the back, but also quite some other people, Zoe Lindau, for example, standing in the center. So this group of people was discussing what sort of activities were we going to do as a GSBI. Next slide, please. And flying to big conferences. She said, I'm going to Rio because the +20 conference was there. And she said, well, there's nothing about soil and soil biodiversity in the Rio 91 convention, and there we have to raise our voice there. So she went there, and Kelly also. I still remember receiving emails of horror flights, planes that didn't go, storms and whatever. I think that Kelly even didn't make it, but she can just correct me later on during the afternoon. But Diana arrived at the conference and gave a talk, and she just claimed there that we have set up this grassroots organization, and we would just bring soil biodiversity on the table from then on. On the next slide. So with these types of exposure at big conferences, and with this website where we just were able to reach the global community, that's how things got started. And by having side activities at conferences here and there, we really got the community into motion. Next slide, please. This was on Intercol 2013 in London. And actually quite soon we had, so people asked us, what are you going to do? Okay, so we said we are going to produce a global soil biodiversity atlas. Actually, we were a bit boasting because we didn't know how to fund it and how to get it off the ground. But we just said this needs to be done. We also made a proposal for the first global soil biodiversity assessment. And then we said we need to have synthesis of how the soil biodiversity is distributed across the globe. And then Diana had in mind that she would do some sampling in urban areas to bring soil biodiversity to the people. And so she developed with Kelly and Noah Vera and others the Central Park sampling for soil biodiversity. And then we said we also need conferences. So we started a series of soil biodiversity conferences, the first organized in Dijon in France in 2014. Next slide, please. So this is the announcement that was out for the first Global Soil Biodiversity Conference, and it was organized by Philippe Lemonceau, who was coordinator of an EU project named EcoFinders, which were quite a lot of EU soil biodiversity researchers were gathered in this project meeting. And Philippe was very keen to organize the meeting, and we thought, well, if we would get 350, maybe 400 people, then we would be very glad. But the counter didn't stop counting, so it was, I think, over 600, maybe even close to 700 people that were gathered in Dijon. And we had a great conference. It was also just before the 2015 International Year of Soil started. And everybody was enthusiastic, so this sort of further got us off the ground. Then the next slide. Then we had 3 more conferences. The next one was we went to China, and I know that, and I think that Elizabeth Bach was the executive director then, or Tanwa. It was quite a headache because we were quite often lost in translation, but we got it off the ground in Nanjing. It was held from 15 to 18 October 2017. And there were more than 1,000 scientists from 47 countries. And a lot of Chinese people, they just had a big program on soils. So that also helped setting this up. Next slide, please. And the local organizers were Renfang Shen and Yong Guangzhou. And of course the China Soil Microbiome Initiative, which was quite substantial, more than 35 million US dollars. Well, people just used that conference to to come together and also discuss this issue from various viewpoints. Next slide, please. And this conference was really great because we had all kinds of workshops. We had writing workshops about how to write a high impact paper, and we had soil biology, biochemistry, just organizing sessions. We had roundtable discussions organized by Stefan Guysen, for example. We had ecological theory on soil biota, and we also had roundtable discussions linking soil biodiversity to ecosystem functioning. And it was a very, very dynamic meeting in Nanjing. The next slide. So, and in the margin of the meeting, besides drinking beer, we just had all kinds of plans for writing papers. Here you see me with Diana and Stefan Guysen, just talking about a review paper for current biology, which was published soon afterwards, or some years later actually. And so there was a really good vibe. If I look back at this, it's just a bit like an adventure book that we were writing. Can I see the next slide, please? So then the third conference was organized in Dublin by Tom Bolger, and Monica Farfan was executive director then, and you see them with Diana. We also had some people from the Science Advisory Committee together, and from the top of my head, we had over 800 people coming together there. And this was also a great success. Next slide, please. And here you see Diana in the way how she always opened the conferences, and you will have seen her a lot in that position, just making the audience aware and kicking off the whole workshop, and just make sure that something would happen. If I look back at this, I think she was probably already pretty tired there. It was 2023. We always were thinking of Diana going on until she would be 120 or more, and in hindsight, I think we just have been overwhelmed always by her energy and drive, and so. Can I see the next slide? There were, besides the conferences, there were also collaborative projects. So I mentioned already the 2012 Soil Biodiversity in the Central Park project group. There were also meetings in Germany at the ESDIF conference center in Leipzig, where the global soil biodiversity synthesis was prepared. And the next slide, please. Then we had the START meeting at ISPRA in Italy for the Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas in 2014. And then in 2016, the Atlas was published. And actually, it's amazing to see, if you would look into the inside of the Atlas, to see how many people have contributed to it. And we were really lucky that the European Commission's Research Institute at ISPRA, the Joint Research Center, was sort of taking this up, and also taking care for the printing of the Atlas. But putting this together with so many people in just less than 1.5 years, quite an achievement. The Atlas has been translated in a number of languages, including in Chinese a couple of years ago. And it's very well known. It has been very well used. Next slide, please. Then we thought, okay, now we also should start developing a real global soil biodiversity assessment. And in 2019, we got the opportunity to be present at COP14 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and Kelly Ramirez went there. By that time, she was working in my institute in Wageningen, and she flew to Egypt, and basically she sort of paved the way for having this soil biodiversity assessment done. And getting this really off the ground, she went to Italy for 3 months to work together with Monica Kobayashi from the UN Biodiversity Program, and they brought all the people together who gave inputs in this assessment. It was still a paper assessment. It was more an IPBES type of document, but it was the first, really the first overview of soil biodiversity knowledge worldwide that we had. So quite unprecedented. I'm still thankful that Kelly and Monica did all this great work. The next slide, please. And coming back to the previous slide, so the meeting was in 2019 in Sharm el Sheikh, and in 2020 the global soil biodiversity, or the state of knowledge document was ready. So that's all again a real achievement. And we could do that because we had so many people involved in the GSBI. So the fourth conference will be next year in Victoria in BC in Canada from 12 to 15 April. Zoe Lindau is the main organizer. Carlos Barreto is the co-chair of the conference, and Lina Wilonen is the from GSBI, the person just making sure that this all will happen smoothly and properly. Next slide, please. So then, besides the conferences, the Atlas, the state of knowledge document, we also had blogs, and these blogs were meant for young researchers because Diana not only encouraged female researchers in science, she was also very supportive for many young researchers to get off to take off in their research career or career in whatever area related to soils and soil biodiversity. So this blog is called Beneath Our Feet, and we have regular contributions placed on the website of the GSBI, and it also gives the possibility to young researchers, if they have a new finding or so, to get exposure, and they can put it on a CV as something that they did. Next slide, please. So, for example, there's things about mycorrhizal fungi when people visited the conference or just a novel approach like the first continent-wide DNA assessment, sounds coming from soil, and if there is a launch of a new network, these all are in blogs, and if you're interested, you can just go to the website and scroll through it. Next slide, please. And then COVID came, and we were just coming together as a GSBI team online, and said, we need to do something for all the young people who are now locked up in their house. They can't go to conferences, they can't attend meetings, they don't get credit for these things, so let's bring the meetings to them. So that's how we started the GSBI Speaks webinars, and basically every 2 or 3 months or so we had a webinar, and every time Diana emailed especially Richard and Joe and me and said, hey guys, we need to get going, so what's the next topic that we will take on board? And then we come up with several ideas and then found speakers for that. The next slide, please. These webinars, and here you see a collage of several webinars. For example, top right, soil biodiversity in the city. We have a webinar. We had webinar on the underestimated role of soil animal diversity in biodiversity. We had something about policy right under, and there are many different topics and networks to deal with complex soil biodiversity data, for example. And every time the seminar started with an announcement from Diana, and then there was a group of 3 or 4 presenters and the chair. Then the people gave a short pitch. The chair gave an overview, and then after 3/4 of an hour, the floor was opened to people to ask questions and to have a discussion through the chat with the presenters who were online then. And that really went well. We had webinars where there were 500 people in, or even more. And so that is still going on. Next slide, please. So here's another series of these webinars. Next slide, please. And so we also had the state of knowledge discussed through such a webinar. And here top right, you see Diana opening the webinar. Next slide, please. And the next webinar is about to come. And it's about soil inoculation, whether it works or how we can make it work. So you're all welcome to join. Next slide, please. And then other things were just also started from GSBI. So Soilborne, the global network laboratories to assess soil biodiversity, was also set up with Diana in the core group, and kneeling, you see Carlos Guerra and Nicole Eisenhower, who have been leading Soilborne, and Diana, an active participant in it. Several other people you might recognize from the picture. Next slide, please. I'm getting towards the end. I see that we're running a bit out of time. And also the NetSOP, the International Network on Soil Biodiversity, that where Peter de Ruyter is going to talk about later on, was also co-initiated by Diana through GSBI. And so all these things have started, I think, or at least we were able to give it the push. Next slide, please. So at some stage, we said, gosh, the bucket list that we had in 2012, we did it all. And the GSBI has grown from 350 people in the beginning to 4,000, so over 4,700 people now. So, and if you are in these webinars, you see people from all parts of the world. They are recorded, so people can also look them back later on. But actually, so we have done it all, and it's unbelievable. When I was putting this slide series together, and I just thought, we have written an adventure book together. And then at some stage we said, okay, what's next? So we had several things. Well, I just give some here as bullets. We had capacity building in the Global South, because we really see that soil biodiversity is practiced a lot in certain parts of the world, but in the South it was much more difficult to get to reach people, especially in Africa, which is still a blind spot for us, or relatively blind spot. We also want to bring the global soil biodiversity assessment in practice, and also well, do something with all the knowledge that we collect. And we also started speaking about a new generation to take over GSBI. And at some stage I said, okay, I'll be the first to step out, and the young person can come in, and then we gradually rotate. And that was sort of the point where we were a year and a half ago. And didn't, so, well, we were just thinking about, okay, how to get this done? Do we need to have elections? Is it sort of open procedure and so on and so on? And then March 25, I got this terrible news from Lina that Diana passed away. So that sort of brought us at least in a situation where we first needed to see how to keep things going. And I think now, a year later, we are more at the in the position of taking this up and then see how the GSBI can be brought further by the younger generation. Can I see the next slide, please? So we have sent out a call to send in bids for hosting the GSBI from 2026. So I know people worldwide are talking about it, how to get it done. It will be a challenge because we also realize that we have received great support from CSU, and getting this established somewhere else really needs to get this organized properly, and that's the challenge that we are facing at this moment. I'm pretty sure that we will get somewhere, but it also will take a little bit of time. On the next slide. So if you're not a member of GSBI yet, please join us. It's for free. And we've been talking a lot about it. We said it should be free in order to reach all the people in Africa, Asia, in the poorer countries. And so then we have to find another way to finance this grassroots organization. But we thought it would be really important to get the global community in action, and as I've shown with the atlas and the state of knowledge document and all the websites and the conferences, we really are able to mobilize to bring people in motion. Next slide, please. And again, I can't stress this enough. GSBI would not have been possible without CSU. It was also mentioned in the introduction talk. I think Diana brought the world to CSU, but she also brought CSU to the world. And I think this adventure never could have been done without the great support that we have received. And also we are very glad that CSU generously offered to keep the office of GSBI going on until the next year. The next slide. So this is where I would like to conclude. Diana, she wrote history with this. She wrote GSBI. She was GSBI, but she also inspired us to keep going. And I think we have been able to set up something which has enormous impact worldwide, and it would just be a shame to let this go. So this is what we keep it going, and let's see where we can make GSBI land next year. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm pleased that I was invited to give this talk. Sorry a bit for the messy appearance. Yeah, I'm so glad that we were able to set this up and show soil biodiversity to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Wim. It was a wonderful set of reflections. I think we're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Andre Franco. He's very familiar with CSU, being here as a research scientist for a number of years in the biology department. He's currently assistant professor at Indiana University. He'll be sharing some thoughts spanning from Antarctica to the tropical areas of Brazil and how it influences research. Thank you, Andre.
All right, thanks Dennis for the introduction. Thanks to the organizing committee for the invite and for organizing this event. It's always great to be here at CSU. So Diana was well known for her research in Antarctica, but more than that, Diana was truly a global scientist. And as Dennis said, I worked with her for a number of years. And you know, when you work for a global scientist, you get to work in different settings. And in my case, that means doing soil ecology research in 3 different continents with Diana. So my mission today, as requested by Peter and Lina, is tell you very briefly about these 3 projects in the Amazonia, Antarctica, and in the US, in grasslands here in the Great Plains area, and mix that with stories about Diana that really exemplify the type of person and the type of scientist that she was. So my story with Diana and with soil ecology and soil biodiversity science, it started in an event that Vin mentioned just a few minutes ago. This was the Rio Plus 20 United Nations conference in Rio. And during that conference, Diana, together with Kelly Ramirez and George Brown and others, they organized this side event to bring soil biodiversity to the stage, right? To bring that theme to the meeting and having this side event going there. So this specific event had a huge impact on my career path and really on my life. And the fun thing is that I wasn't even there. How did it work? So the thing was that my advisor at the time, so I was in 2012, I was a first-year PhD student at the University of São Paulo in Brazil. And my advisor at the time went to the meeting. At the meeting, he attended the side event that they organized, and they got to meet with Diana and talk to her. And you know, after you talk for 5 minutes with Diana, you develop a bit of a passion for soil biodiversity, right? That happened to him. So my dissertation was supposed to be all about soil carbon. My advisor, Carlos Seri, at the University of São Paulo, was a soil biogeochemist working mostly on soil carbon, greenhouse gas emissions. And that was my theme at the time, until he came back from the conference. And he knocked on my door and said, hey, he had a little flyer from the GSBI, and the flyer was listing all these ecosystem services that soil biodiversity was contributing to. And he was like, I was in this conference, I talked to this woman, Diana Wall. You know, this sounds important. We should pay attention to this. Why don't you include some aspect of soil biodiversity into your research? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do some research on that, and maybe that's gonna turn into something. So we started researching, and we also started having Zoom, well, it wasn't even Zoom, it was Skype, meetings with Diana at that time. And so soon after that, specifically 2 years after that, I was here. I was at CSU to start what should be a 1-year stay that became an 8-year-long science partnership with Diana and her lab that truly shaped my career and my life. Here, I had the chance to work with a very vibrant and intellectually vibrant environment in her lab that really taught me everything that I know to this day. So in the lab, there was Cecilia Tomazel and Jarvis, who were kind of the backbones, giving all the technical and administrative support to everything that we did. And then there was this team of young scientists working many exciting projects from Antarctica to US grasslands and everywhere in between. So I found myself here, was very excited, was very intimidated at first to be working with, you know, it's Diana Wall after all. But I was super encouraged and motivated to be here. And as I said, this was an experience that shaped my career. I wouldn't be where I am today without the time I spent with Diana. At some point, I was very comfortable in that position. Working under Diana Wall is a very comfortable position because she's going to be shielding you from all the trouble that you can get involved on, right? And I used to tell her, look, I'm fine here until you kick me out. I'm not applying for jobs. I'm doing science. I'm loving what I do. But it was truly a great time. So we did some cool science together. And the first project that I'm gonna talk about today was the main project that brought me here in the first place. And this was to do some work across the Great Plains prairies to study the connections between soil nematodes and plants under severe and frequent droughts. So we did this experiment across different sites. So it was a multi-site, multi-year experiment where we collaborated with colleagues at Arizona State University to understand the dynamics of nematodes interacting with plants. During the many field trips that we had together, we were usually talking a lot, and I love talking about, the current politics, and this was 2015, so it wasn't that much to talk about as we have today. But still, we should update me on the recent politics and talk about many different things. And it didn't take that long for me to figure out the rather frenetic lifestyle that Diana had, right? So you all knew her very well, and you knew that Diana wasn't necessarily, life balance was not her cup of tea, right? She was work all the time. And as a young scientist, you look at that and say, okay, so to be successful in science, that's what is needed, right? So, but I appreciate the fact that very early on, one of the first trips that we had together, she was careful enough to tell me, and she told that to me and to the other postdocs in the lab. She just wanted to make sure that we knew that we didn't have to be her to succeed in science. She told us very clear, look, the most important thing that you bring to the job is you. Be you, and in that way, you can do cool science and great science. And I really appreciate the fact that she told me that. And far enough, we got to do some cool science together. So on that project, one of the main findings was that, so if you talk to Diana for 5 minutes, you know something about nematodes, and you probably know that there are different types of nematodes. Some nematodes feed on plant roots, others feed on microbes, and then you have these crazy carnivore nematodes that actually feed on other nematodes. So what we found was that we draw those predatory nematodes. I don't know if I can point things from here. Well, I'm not going to try. But you can see a predatory nematode there, and the fact that under draw, their population really decreased. We saw a crash in the population of predatory nematodes under draw, and that makes sense because those animals are longer, they are bigger than other nematodes, their life span is longer, so they're more vulnerable to disturbance in general. Well, simultaneously, we saw a big increase in the population of root-feeding nematodes in those soils. Importantly, those responses were much greater in magnitude in the more moist mesic sites, which was the Konza LTR in Kansas, than in the drier sites, the semi-arid and arid sites that we were working here in Colorado and New Mexico. So if this is telling us that for the future, with more frequent and severe droughts, we might be getting more of these root-feeding nematodes in the soil in moist, in tall grass systems. What would that mean to the plants, right? Does that mean that the plants are going to be more infected and then having some consequence for their productivity? That's what we try to answer with a greenhouse experiment where we went out to the field. We collect a bunch of soils from the shortgrass prairie here. We brought them to the greenhouse. We defaunated all these soils, meaning we kill all the nematodes, something that Diana was not very happy with, but we did that. And then we put those defaunated soils in microcosms where we then inoculated different population sizes of root-feeding nematodes. What we were trying to accomplish here was to mimic the response that we saw in the field, the level of population of these nematodes that we saw in our field plots, right? From less to more of these nematodes. And we also crossed that with some water treatments, again, to simulate the drought scenarios that we manipulated in the field. So we did that, and the goal was to understand, again, if we are getting into a future where we're going to have more of these root-feeding nematodes in the soil, what that means for plants in terms of their total biomass productivity, but also in terms of how plants allocate that new biomass above ground and below ground as roots. So we had a big focus on plant allocation because that's important for the ability of ecosystems to assimilate carbon. And it's also an important adaptation mechanism of plants to withstand droughts, right? So if water is limiting their growth in the soil, they are going to invest more in producing roots that uptake water and less into producing leaves that lose water. Okay, that's a lot of background information. Let's get to business here. So what we found in this experiment, and here I'm showing you the proportion of root biomass for the grasses, and on the other axis I have the water treatments from less water to more water. What I want to highlight here really quickly, if you look at the red and green lines in this graph, those are treatments where we had either defaunated soils, meaning soils with no nematodes, or soils with the natural population of nematodes that we saw in the field. In those conditions, you see that under drought, there was an increase in root allocation for plants, meaning that plants were maximizing root production to maximize water uptake. That's what most of the ecosystem models tell us. That's what plant physiologists, ecologists tell us when they predict how plants are going to respond to drought. However, now if you look at the black and blue lines, something different happened when we increased the population of root-feeding nematodes, similar to what we saw in the field under the drought plots. In those cases, plants were not able to increase their biomass allocation below ground because there was a lot of nematodes feeding on the roots, right? So this was a very important finding because it tells us that nematodes might have a big impact on the way that on the allocation patterns of these plants. That has implications to things like soil carbon, because now we know that most soil carbon is actually root carbon. And it also has implications for the ability of plants to withstand drought. So we were very excited about this. I remember when I first saw these results and sent to Diana, we were super excited about this. And so here are some conclusions from this project. We saw that changes in rainfall can really mess with the composition of nematode communities. That those response of nematodes were graded in magnitude in more moist sites compared to drier sites. And finally, those nematode response were really important in controlling the way that plants allocate their biomass to produce roots or above ground parts. So that's it for this part. Next, we go to Amazonia. And this was a collaborative project with a number of Brazilian institutions. This was a collaboration that was brought together by Professor Bruno Sobral, I think Bruno is here, and involved other CSU faculty like Zaid Abdul, who is in the picture there as well. So here we got the chance to go down to the Amazon a few times to study how Amazonian deforestation was affecting soil biodiversity. So this was a very exciting project. And the most important product that came out of this was this paper on the impacts of Amazonian deforestation on soil biodiversity. This paper made it to the front cover of Conservation Biology. But before I tell you what was the main finding here, I want to here again emphasize another characteristic of Diana, which was she was a master of celebrating accomplishments of her younger mentees, right? It was always super fun to share with her, even small accomplishments. She would be very excited about everything. And with this paper specifically, it was unusual. We had too many reviewers looking into that. She was not very pleasant with that. We had 6 reviewers. So that means that our letter of rebuttal to the reviews was very long. I think we wrote 10 pages. And there was a lot of work. So when it finally happened that the paper was accepted, I got this letter from her. I can't really read it from here. Maybe you can. But what she's telling me here is that first she was behind on things. She would always say that. But then she's like, wow, you hit a home run with that letter of rebuttal. Frame it, man. That took a lot of diplomacy. What else? I can't really read from here. Brain power, science, science knowledge. And look at them. Now that you have all these little happy editors waving to have your paper published and in press. So I remember the feeling of having that letter from Diana as a postdoc. It was very encouraging. And to this day, I miss a lot. When anything happened, I would really run to share with her because her reaction was always like that. And those moments are some that I really won't forget. Okay, what we found in this study? First, we found that most of the losses that we had for both soil fauna abundance and diversity occur on wetter sites in the Amazon. We think about the Amazon as being all wet, equally wet. That's not the case, right? So we found that on sites with mean annual precipitation greater than 1900 millimeters, that's where we lose the higher number of species after deforestation. And we didn't quite see any recovery even after 30 years following deforestation. So that means that in places where there was a lot of secondary succession, there was more or less of a secondary forest already established, still the levels of soil biodiversity never really recover to anything similar that we had before. Also for microbes, we found that losses of microbial diversity occur mostly in highly acidic soils. And so what this research really contributed to was to show that maybe these wetter sites in areas where soils are very acidic might be priority areas for conservation if we want to conserve soil biodiversity in those places. So we helped a little bit in giving direction to prioritizing areas of conservation. So it was very good to work on that. And I couldn't resist adding these photos here because I want to make sure everyone knows that Diana was not that type of scientist that we call paper hands, right? She was, of course, she traveled a lot. She had other bigger, more important things to do. But often when she was able to, she would be involved in field work and lab work as well. And here's Diana with Bruno Sobral and local students down in Brazil, working in the lab with the soil processing. If you have done that before, you know how tedious it is, right? But still, we spend a number of days in the soil just grinding and sieving soil samples, and that was a lot of fun. Another thing that she loved to do was to interact with the local students, and I remember how much they appreciated that, to be interacting with Diana, learning from her, and connecting with her. So that was another very cool project that I had the chance to work together with her. But everyone knows that Diana was the happiest when she was in Antarctica. And here is a view of the beautiful Wall Valley, named after her. Diana, her career in Antarctica spanned many decades. She has many, many contributions to understand biodiversity in the continent, how that biodiversity is responding to modern changes in the climate, and how important things like soil nematodes are for carbon cycling, nutrient cycling those systems, right? So unfortunately, I didn't quite join Diana in a trip to Antarctica. I always remember that I would still want to go. It didn't happen, but I work with her with a very large data set in a research, try to understand the responses of Antarctic soil fauna to climate-driven change since the last glacial maximum, meaning about 20,000 years ago. So this was really looking at changes in soil biodiversity with climate over geological timeframes to try to project what's going to happen with this biodiversity now with the modern changes in climate that are happening at a much larger pace. So we look at data into collembola mites, nematodes mostly, and also tardigrades to try to understand in this specific region of Antarctica, the Transantarctic Mountains, the Shackleton Glacier, how soil biodiversity responded to glacial retreat since the last glacial maximum. So we found that soils more recently exposed to glacial recession had the highest faunal abundances and also diversity compared to soils which were exposed much longer ago. So if you look at this graph here, I have the abundance of this organism plotted against distance from the ice shelf. That's our proxy for how long the soils were exposed, right? The closer they are to the ice shelf, the more recent deglaciation happens in that area. The farther they are from the ice shelves, the opposite, those soils have been exposed for a much longer time. So there was a big response, meaning that the soils that were exposed more recently were much more suitable habitat for soil biodiversity. That might have implications now with a lot of deglaciation happening with global warming, that might have implications for invasive species and the whole dynamics of soil biodiversity in these systems. We look at closely to one species of nematode, and that's Scottnema lindsay. I'm probably mispronouncing that here, as I always did, and Diana would always get mad with me, because this is her favorite nematode by far. Diana loved all nematodes, I think, but this one had definitely a special place in her heart. So Scott nema is the most abundant nematode and really the most abundant animal in the dry valleys of Antarctica. About 70% of the population of nematodes is going to be that one species. It occupies a very important place in the trophic chain of that very simple biome. And it is responsible for a large part of the carbon and nutrient cycle in that system. So Diana loved it. That's a picture that I saw her showing people many, many times. I saw her talking to Congress people in Washington, D.C. about Scott nema once, and I couldn't believe that. So everyone who talked to Diana a little bit have heard something about Scott nema before. So what we tried to look at was what would be among all the environmental drivers of Scott nema abundance, what would be the most important one in terms of how this species is responding to soil exposure age. And we found that soil salinity was the most important driver here. And again, it makes sense because those older exposed soils had much higher levels of salinity that can be harmful to these nematodes compared to the more recently exposed soils. So that was an interesting finding from that research. And again, I always, reminded her that I still want to go down to Antarctica to collect some of those samples and look at those nematodes myself. It ended up not happening, but I know that Byron Adams with many other soil ecologists in the McMurdo LTR are working very hard still to try to build on Diana's legacy of all this research in Antarctica and try to understand the most important questions about how this biodiversity is responding to what is going on these days, right? Very cool. So to finish, I just want to go back to my title and say that my science journey with Diana across all these places and across all these projects was really shaped by the passion that we had in common for soils and for their amazing biodiversity. Diana was hugely important in bringing scientists together. I hear a lot from senior colleagues that before the GSBI and all the effort that Diana put, earthworm ecologists will only talk to earthworm people, nematode ecologists talking to nematode people. That's not the case anymore, and in large part because of the effort that Diana put in make sure that we are working together. So soil biodiversity might have a place in the discussions on environmental policy, conservation agendas, and those type of things. So Diana has a wonderful legacy on that, and a terrific career, many accomplishments, prizes, awards. I think it would be redundant to list them here. But most important for me, despite all those accomplishments, Diana was a very humble person, and her sense of humility was something wonderful to see for a person at her stature, right? And I want to show a funny example of that here. And this is when I found out by accident that Diana was listed on the top 1% most cited scientists in the world, and this was in 2018. My guess is that she had been listed in many years past. She never realized that because this was not the type of thing that should be paid attention to. I found that, and then I sent an email to the whole lab saying, congratulations, Diana, you are listed top 1%. This deserves publicity. I'm gonna post something on the lab website. And it took a few minutes for her reply. Here it comes. Citations for what? Speeding? She couldn't believe. She was like, where's Alan App? Where's Richard Bargett? These people publish impactful papers all the time. So we couldn't help but just laugh off the situation. The whole lab was laughing. And this is, I think, really, it really encapsulates her character and being a very humble person all the time. So this is now the final text that I exchanged with her. This was by the occasion of her 80th birthday. I was in Brazil. It was summer there, so I was in the beach, took a picture, sent her a picture, and said, happy birthday. You know that, I told you many times, you were the best. I'm so lucky for calling you a friend, a colleague, and a mentor. Raising a glass for you today, all the best. And she was happy because she was celebrating with her relatives. And I really appreciate and thank Diana for all the work that she did for the field of soil ecology, for science, and for me personally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre, for that reflection and getting us back on schedule. Our next speaker is Peter de Ruyter. He's associated with a number of universities in Holland, but he's also an expert in soil biology, food webs, soil food webs, and he'll be reflecting on aspects of how Diana's influenced policy and biodiversity. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And also thank you very much, organizers. I'm so happy that I'm back here at CSU. I've been here many, many times and worked a lot with John Moore writing papers. So we had always a good reason to be here, but we are slowing down a little bit. And now I got this invitation and I'm back again and I really enjoy it. And it's also a little bit an honor that I'm asked to say something about Diana. And I gave my talk the title, The Worlds of Diana. And it comes down to some memories that I want to share with you. 3. It's so dry here. First, I have to do it myself. Let's see. The red one, right? No. Oh, here. No, I will do it myself. And the first is FAO, the World Food Agricultural Organization. Just say something short. It's started at 1945, directly after the Second World War, and with a very clear and short mission: enough food and food of enough quality to feed the world. And it is still since then. But through the times, in particular the last decades, the mission of the FAO broadened a little bit because of the increasing awareness of the importance of sustainability in agricultural systems. And for that reason, in 2012, so not that long ago, the FAO started the Global Soil Partnership. And the mission of the Global Soil Partnership is, of course, part of the FAO, but it's now a focus on sustainability, in particular, sustainable use of natural resources, and the important one, the soil. And the first thing that the Global Soil Partnership did is writing a status report. It is the status of the World Soil Resources Report. It's a big report. It has 650 pages, a lot of authors. And happily, there's also a chapter on soil biodiversity. And that is not automatic because there are a lot of soil documents without, and it's FAO. It's not the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, but here it is in, and it is also because Diana stepped in. From SDBI, some things that I will tell you is in close cooperation with TSBI, but what I now want to say, she's there, and that is also a little bit Diana, window of opportunity. That is very important. If there is a window of opportunity, you step in. Many cases, you step in and it's a waste of time. You know that, but sometimes you're successful and you have to have a nose, the art of stepping in when you want to do it. And there are thousands of reasons not stepping in. Because people prefer to write a scientific article or FAO, who's reading my document. She did it, and there it is. There's a check. And the point is, if you're in, you should not leave. You're in FAO. So what happened then? There came a revision of the World Soil Charter, right? And that summarized principles also for optimum use, sustainable use of soil. And now, biodiversity is in, which was not in yet since all these decades. And then the FAO had the voluntary guidelines for sustainable soil management. And again, you have a guideline, number 7. You're in, you stay in. It's seed. It is a seed and it goes on and on. And this one is mentioned already by Wim. This is made FAO together with TSBI, but such a volume produced by FAO, I still find it a little bit surprising that's already here. Again, big document. By the way, you can have these documents for free. So of course you can download it, PDF, but if you like it on your shelf, if there are copies left, FAO gives you it for free. We never charge for something. So it's a very nice book. I must also say, Diane is of course in the editorial board because she stays in, she stays in, but I would like to say Kelly, who will be speaking next to me. She has been extremely important. She was the managing editor. Without her, it would have been there, but you've been very important, Kelly, and I'm still very happy that it's here. And it was the start, it was sort of preparation of a global symposium of soil biodiversity. The FAO, each year, they try to have a global symposium, about 500 people coming over. This year it was 2021, it was on soil biodiversity, and now we had 4,000. Now everybody can understand why, because this was Corona, so there was no limit in participation. And a lot of people say, yeah, Corona, people link in, they take a cup of coffee, and no, there were 4,000 people. They were apparently all interested in soil biodiversity. They took the effort to join in. And they were not, they will take a cup of coffee, but they were also very active. We had these parallel workshops with more than 100 people in it. And these chats go on and on and on. It was really a very good surprise to see so many people interested in the issue. So, and that was the start, which was also mentioned by Wim. The third item, that was the NetSub, so the International Network on Soil Biodiversity. That is a network. So what is NetSub? NetSub is a network. And that is linking people to one another, connected thinking. We had 4,000 in the symposium, so there are a lot of people. Wim also showed some high numbers, but let's them put them on in a network. Not only scientists. No, FAO is not a scientific institution. It's a network of course, also scientists, but farmers, landowners, policymakers, whatever, practitioners. You want to have them together in one network. And so outreach, because we have seen there are so many people we don't know, they're all over the world, and want to have them on board and keep them on board and learn from them. And one of the words was Open Access 2.0. Now we all know what Open Access is, that the whole world can read our papers. But the other way around is also interesting. There are a lot of people, they don't have access easy to our academic journals or of our knowledge, but they do things that might be extremely important and interesting. Get them in, see what they do, open ways to get their information in a network and see what's coming out. So that's a little bit the background of that NetSub, being together, connected thinking. And of course, it always comes to the same things. Exchange of knowledge, not only scientists, but all of them involved in the issue. See how we can monitor soil biodiversity, also on global scales. And can we see how we can support policy making? And at present, we have a little bit more than 1,000 participants. And they have all over the world. And they have organized themselves in working groups. Again, how can we measure it? How can we manage it? How can we evaluate it? How can we use it for governance? And then there are all kinds of people making activities. George Brown, we've seen him in one of the pictures. Wim, he's very active. He sent out a global survey to a ridiculous number of people, and he received 2,000 responses. There were 2,000 people taking the effort and the energy to fill in the survey. Who wants to fill in a survey? And it was just questions. Do you know what biodiversity is? Do you measure it? How do you measure it? Which animal? For what purpose? 2,000. He will publish it this year. It's very nice. The same headed by Zoe Lindo, how to manage this. And then you have to get these people who are just doing something with soil biodiversity in their practice. Say something about it or write something. It's very difficult. This is my last update, 9 case studies, already 9, maybe more at this time. But that is the kind of work that is doing. And you see, it's about being together, working together, and not only us, but the world. Now, why I am telling you this, that's what I said. It is seeing the window of opportunity, step in, and that is, Diane is good, stay in, and see that it will go on, and not being in your own, but that outreach point, that is very important. And it's in most cases it's a weekend job. You know, you have your work, you have your teaching, and then you have to have somebody who say we do it, just like Wim van der Putten. Let's do it because there are thousands of reasons of not doing it. The art is of finding the reason to do it, and you see it as an impact. This is impact. And this is my second memory. Diana as a scientist. Now, I must say, I did not work much with Diana as a scientist. Sometimes we've met at conferences or symposia, and then Diana gave a talk and I gave a talk. And Diana said, hey, nice talk, Peter. Yes, you have to say so, biodiversity is important. Okay, fine. And but there was one time, there was a long time ago, I think it was in Montreal at the ESA meeting. And she came to me and she said, in your talk, there's something I want to know more about it, because she had all kinds of questions. So apparently I triggered her interest in something that she wanted to know. So we started the discussion, but I remember we were interfered, of course, with other people. They didn't realize that we were having a very important discussion. But I tried for this talk, I tried to reconstruct what it was about and why, in particular why, because I really know what it was about. It was about this. Part of my talk was about the island of Schiermonnikoog. That's part of the Netherlands. It's an island in the north. It's not that it's about 20 kilometers, so horizontally, so it's a smaller island. The interesting thing is that that island moves to the east. So in the east, you have new land, and in the west, it's old land. It moves with a velocity of about 1 meter per year. Not that fast, but it's significant, right? Now, if you walk from the east to the west, you walk along a primary succession from new to old. We call it a Chronos sequence. A Chronos sequence is that you project time on space. So you walk a long time and you see the succession. And one of our students, she looked at the succession below ground just to see how the soil food web assembles, organizes it along a succession. Like this, and of course, this is what you expect. You start very simple, and then groups come in, and then you end up with a very complex food web. And that was it. So why was it that Diana found this so interesting? Now, I went back to the old papers by her, and then I found this paper, together with Ross Virginia, Controls on Soil Biodiversity Insights from Extreme Environments. And in this paper, she published the Antarctic Dry Valley Soil Food Web. And this is the food web. I redraw it a little bit. And she claims this is the most simple soil food web ever published. And then she heard my talk, and she said, hey, and Schiermonnikoog, how does this relate? Well, this is how it relates. I redraw it a little bit, but you see that the web of Diana and Ross, it's simple. It's not the simples, you know, the left is a little bit simpler. And in the meantime, we also had another Chronos sequence that was in Iceland. There you have glaciers and they retract. It's the same situation. The ice goes back, and close to the ice, there's nothing. And then the farther away, you get the succession and the soil formation. So also there's a Chronos sequence. We did the same. You can see that there's a very simple one. Well, in fact, it's not a web. It's just some microbes. And then you have another one, and you see it's simple, right? Is it the most simple? Yes. Right. Diane is right today, right? She's everything what she says. So, right. Because the interesting thing is, if you go to Schiermonnikoog, you look at the nematodes, which are number 3 and 4. Also in Schiermonnikoog, we had quite some species in one group. And also they get in and out. So there was a dynamic and species composition of these groups. So in terms of species, they're quite diverse. The Antarctic web, there's only one genus in the group, nematodes. So the species diversity in a group was much, much smaller. And I understood it has some things to do with salt. But in fact, you have only one genus in one group. So if you think in terms of species diversity, I think she's right. This is a very simple web, and it's not in transition. You know, the others are just building up. This is what it is. If you go there now, maybe you find the same web. Maybe, probably, likely. Now, why I'm telling you this? Now, that is what I meant with Worlds of Diana. You know the World of Diana, the Grand Lady of Soil Biodiversity. You know, the FAO, the world, the huge soil biodiversity, the functionality, effects of global climate change. And on the other hand, she goes to Antarctica and she wants to look at these webs. And what she's saying is, if you look at low diversity communities, they offer the best opportunity to learn about environmental controls on soil biodiversity and the role in functioning. You see, and you can agree with that or not, but it's just that she, as a scientist, she goes for the principles and to understand what it really is, and then she goes looking out for the most simple things. So it's these two worlds. And I like that, yeah. And I can also see it, they are synergetic. You know, that they feed one another, that you looking at reality, you say, I want to understand it. And if you see, I want to understand it, it will bring back to the bigger picture. And that is two worlds that I like together in one person. And then I have a second memory, and then I bring it to Utrecht. Utrecht is a city in the Netherlands. It's in the center of the Netherlands. I always say it's the most beautiful city in the Netherlands. It has a university. It's the largest university of the Netherlands. And it's also an old university. It's not the oldest, but it's old. It's now close to 400 years old. And this is our main building. This is a special building because the Netherlands as a nation was founded in this building. And in 2006, there was the Dies Natalis, which is the birthday of the university. And then the university was 370 years old. And at that special occasion, there were 2 doctorates of honor awarded to 2 persons because of their exceptional contribution to science and society. And one of them was Diana. Now, just to give you some pictures. So here we enter that famous room. Now, it's the lady in front, we call it the pedal, and the guy behind her, of course, you can see that's the boss of the university. And then you see Diana there, and probably she thinks, what am I doing here? Well, you get the doctorate of honor. And so this is then a little bit the procedure you get. We call it a sherp, you call it a sash or sash, or what it is. So, and there's the diploma. And because it's so important, it's also part of the tradition, then you have to show the diploma to the crowd, that everybody can see. Indeed, there's here the Doctor of Honor given to this exceptionally candidate. And in that procedure, there are 2 speeches. The first speech is to explain why that person is awarded with the Doctorate of Honor. That speech may take 5 minutes, not more, strict. And then after that, the honorary doctor may also give a speech. And that can take 1 minute, not longer. And when Diana heard that, okay, perfect, 1 minute. And what did she say? I know what she said. She said the following. She said, our former President Roosevelt said, the nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And then she said, if I give you a handful of soil, I give you thousands of organisms working for you, for me, for us. And that was it. And that made an impression. And afterwards, yeah, the dinner, of course. And the dinner speech was given by the Dean of the Faculty of Law. Now, the Faculty of Law is the largest faculty, important person, and in that faculty, thousands of people working there. And that dean, he started his speech and he said, "Oh, I'm still thinking about the words of Diana Wall. Only one hand and then thousands of organisms working for me." Anyway, now finally, go back to the FAO. This is January 24, so it's only a few months before she passed away. We had a board meeting of NetSop and she was there. You see her on the left picture and on the right picture. And that was the last time I saw her. And just something which I also said before, if you have a meeting at FAO, it's a formal meeting, there's always some high-level person who will come to the meeting and say some words of welcome. Welcome that you take the opportunity to come here, to have your time, to do your important work. We look forward to see the outcome and success. And then such a person goes away and you start working. But Diana, she said, and thank you, but I have a question. I have a question. We are working on recommendations or whatever. And can you help us how we can best formulate it in such a way that it really can help you in when you are, and you can think that's embarrassing. It's not. That person sits down and says, yes, let's talk about it, right? And that someone like that, it becomes something substantial. And in fact, what Diana is then doing, she's already paving the way of getting implemented and not having your document in a drawer of a desk. That is also the art of seeing how you should do that. That was typically Diana and the energetic and the sharpness and so on. And then finally, after the last day, somebody asked me, well, Peter, you know the place you better. I said, do you know any place that can have a nice dinner? I said, well, this is Italy, this is Rome. You can have nice restaurants all over the place. But to be honest, if I'm alone, there's here a very small family-run business. Dad is in the kitchen, mom's busy, and we go there, said Diana. We go there. And during the meeting, every night we went there. And we were sitting just on a small wooden table, have some pizza, beer, talking about things that are important or not important, doesn't matter. We're just having a good time. And for me, that are precious moments. For me, that are the memories with a golden edge around it. And here I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker, our last speaker, is Kelly Ramirez. And many of you have been introduced to her already in the discussions, especially from Wim and Peter. It was, she's been, she knows Colorado State very well. And it's really a pleasure to have her back and share her thoughts. So, Kelly.
Okay, I have my timer or my clock because if you were ever in charge of a meeting with Diana, you know it needed to run on time, and she made this face when it was not on time. And at that first GSBI meeting, I forget who was talking too long, but she just walked on the stage and was like, and then that person was done talking because they had gone like 15 minutes over. And if you go over in a talk, you're not only being rude to the audience, but potentially sometimes, and I'm not blaming Wim, this wasn't his fault, it was, but like to the people after you, especially if they're young scientists or a woman scientist who doesn't get as much time. And she was really aware of that. And I keep that in mind whenever I organize or mentor, etc., and teach. So I was asked actually to give a talk for the GSBI in September. So I put some stuff together and I'm going to go over some of it today. What's really amazing is, as the GSBI executive director, watching Diana put together the GSBI from basically the beginning. It started the year before I started working with her, but really like me in the office, we were putting content out, like Wim said, every week. And I learned how to set up a grassroots community and a grassroots organization that made an impact. And then fast forward to 2016, I put together a new grassroots organization for women in science called 500 Women Scientists. And I don't think still. I don't think I would have been able to do that without the example that Diana helped me learn through the GSBI. So you couldn't see my photo earlier, these terrible bangs. Somehow I still have bangs, I don't know, more than a decade later. This was my first like headshot for a job and I was very excited. And I went through these emails. You can't even read this over here. Do these work? Hi, okay, I'm gonna go over here so I can read. Okay, so all of her emails, and Andre kind of hinted to this, were just like, she was wired and excited. There were 200,000, I don't even know what this is, but like all these exclamation points. Oh, we're working on a ton of stuff. I'm on my way home. I need to re-advertise your position. Just haven't been home to do it. I am home for a while and so very glad. So many exclamations. She's telling me all about the projects. There's always 100 names in the emails or conversations that you have. In my very first conference at that London conference that we went to, she talked to me as if I knew every person. She probably mentioned Peter's name. She mentioned Wynn's name. I hadn't met anyone and I just had a journal where I wrote down everyone's name and I went home and Googled them. Like, who are these people that I need to know? They were all people in soil biodiversity. Anyway, so she's in here. It's like, how is your Central Park paper published yet? They need to get on it, blah, blah, blah. Like all of this. This is after I left. These are all emails after I left and still her enthusiasm was there. It was just always so fun. Okay, so the first meeting, yeah, Planet Under Pressure in London, I made 2 mistakes. One, I didn't have a suit. And 2, I checked a bag. You do not do that when you're traveling with Diana. I mean, maybe if you're going to Antarctica, but you're in a hurry. Like there are things to do, people to meet with, events to plan. And so we got off the plane and we had to wait for my bag. So that was my first mistake. Then I didn't have like the appropriate attire. So I went like, cause I had only been a graduate student before that, not a postdoc in this policy relevant position. And the other graduate student with me we went shopping and I got a suit so I could dress up with and like match Diana because you match your boss, right? And I didn't know what she wore because I had never worked with her before. Anyway, so like Wim said, we made it to Rio. There was a thunderstorm. So we were there for 2 nights. It was kind of ridiculous. It was a whirlwind. She sat up there, just like most of the conferences that we went to when she was on a panel, she was the only woman up there amidst these soil scientists who she frankly thought were boring and not making a difference for the work that she was interested in. And so she would speak about that. And this was like the first time that I really got to see her speak on a panel and make a difference, like Andre talked about. And we went to like we went to a fancy dinner and like met these fancy people. I set an alarm to wake up like 30 minutes early, which is real early, to go like put my feet on the sand in Brazil because otherwise like all of my photos are just like out the cab window. I'm like, there we go. That was our trip. But it was really important that we were there and it made such a difference to starting the GSBI. And she understood that and that was just her the whole way through. Okay, so we produced all this content coming up with slogans and highlighting the ecosystem services and really trying to make it like visually appealing, not just for the soil biodiversity folks, but for the policy people who were coming to our events and who we were talking to. And that's fun that you got a flyer. It was probably something like this. We had a fantastic graphic design artist at SOGIS a while, like when I was there. I'm sure there's another one now, but she helped make all of these things and we passed them out because Diana understood the value of the visuals. We couldn't just go there and talk. She didn't want to send them home with a business card, though we did get business cards that looked like this, that were very pretty. I kind of wish I could still see them. Hi, Cecilia. Yeah, so we like produced all of this content and it was a whirlwind. And I learned from her that she was really good about recognizing consistency in the content that you were putting out to make sure everything looked right. She was so good at editing and it was such, like you learn how to edit and write a paper when you're in graduate school in science, but like to package it for policy or for people outside of science was something I learned from her. And she had all of these things at the top of her mind to look out for, which was really, really nice. So like Wim said, we went global and we posted a map of all the places where we had representation. This was back in 2013 probably. And so and the Global South is underrepresented like Wim said. And so Diana made it a point to make sure we were reaching out to those countries and universities and places that did not have representation. And she even here, like then we had the Global Soil Biodiversity Assessment that started here at CSU. We had to invite all the authors first for the Atlas and then for the assessment, and they all came to CSU, which was really fun to host everyone here. The vice provost came and talked, which was cool. And yeah, we produced the Global Soil Biodiversity Atlas. Here's our whole group. I think Wim already showed this photo. Wim kind of stole my thunder here with some of these photos. And again, oh yeah, Kristen, here was one of our figures that she made showing, like highlighting the role of soil biodiversity for ecosystem services. And this is actually from a paper we published with Elizabeth Bach and Tandra on soil sustainability and soil biodiversity ecosystem services. And there was our atlas and all the happy people. It was a lot of hurting. I learned how to contact people in a professional way and continue to bother them until they helped you out. There is a way to do it that's tactful, and Diana taught me how to do that. And that has come in handy for the rest of my life, I'm sure. I will continue to use those skills. And yeah, February maybe wasn't the best time to meet in Fort Collins, but we had a great time and we got a lot done. And again, like Wim said, it was like they had this kind of vague idea that they wanted. And then we basically, it was like those bullet points that he had. It was like really vague. We want to make an atlas. Okay, like what do we do to make an atlas? We asked CSU for some money to bring them in. We asked FAO or Luca Montanarella, who was with the EU, to like get people excited about it. And it was like Diana was the engine behind it, right? Like we were all just the cogs and she was pushing us forward the entire time. And yeah, we came out with this beautiful atlas, then the assessment, and then this FAO report. So Diana led the way, right? Like everyone said, she was the pioneer of ecology and climate research. She did so much, and she is our soil superhero. Really, so many of us in soil ecology, even like from my generation for sure, like Diana was well ahead of us, and everyone in Soil Ecology Society knew who she was and wanted to talk to her, wanted to get her time. And if she, just like Peter just said, when she likes your talk and she comes and asks you questions, now I really have a question for you. I want it, like she would break it down with you. And she did that for young folks. And like as a graduate student, that made such a big difference for so many people. So the wall impact factor, right? Like she had 1 million publications, an H-index through the roof, and citations, right? But her true impact was her heart and her mentorship of her students, her postdocs, and visiting faculty. And so just like really quickly to show her impact on soil biodiversity and policy. So just if you look at publications until 2024, sorry, I made this in 2020 in the middle of last year. But so basically GSBI started right around 2012, right? So we start to see an increase. And then the atlas came out here, and then like we and all this time where Andre, when you were working with her, she's still working on this. So she is pushing this forward, and this did not stop going up. And I really think this is largely because of her. Like this was not, these are not her publications, right? These are the entire community is publishing on the role of policy and soil biodiversity and how important it is. And there were some other things that I saw when I started to look up her impact. One, states across the United States, more and more states have policy related to soil biodiversity. And I don't think that's like a coincidence that that happened in the last decade. It's because she was pushing this all over wherever she went across societies. So as a mentor, how do you have a lasting impact? This is something I learned from her. Dedication, passion, support, and then focusing on your mentorship and leadership, giving people the tools to succeed. And so for Diana, the Diana way, 5 a.m. and weekends, right? She was working. She did not insist that we were there at 5 a.m. and she did not insist we were there on weekends, at least by my time. I do remember Martine saying she called him once and was like, "Where are you? You're not in the office on a Sunday." And he was like, "No, I will not be there on a Sunday." And she adjusted. And I did get an email once. It was like snow was coming down and I was like working from home, and she sternly wrote, "Why aren't you in the office?" And I was like, "Dear Diana," and I wrote this like very calm email, like, "I am working at my computer at this moment. I am not biking in the snow right now. I'll see you later." And she was like, "Okay, that's fair." Get riled up. She totally got riled up about everything. Yeah, Yahoo was my favorite, like when you did something well, like Yahoo, and you could hear her down the hallways. Or Yeah, Jarvis, get in here. Do we have enough money to go to this conference? Like she would yell that down to Jarvis. Find a team. She was so much about building that team, like you saw with all the GSBI photos. We have a team that we could go to and reach out to and ask them for more people to join the team, right? She encouraged that. We don't just want the same old people every time too. She wanted us to keep mixing it up. And then setting an example. And she set such an example for me. Yeah, I had to go buy a suit, right? And I had to make sure my nails are done, even though they're chipped today. So that failed on that one. So I looked it up. She had over 220 sustainability leadership fellows, which is a fantastic program and made such a difference for me as a postdoc. And I know made such a difference for many of the postdocs that were in it with me. And I keep in touch with them today. And they still are out there learning, using the tools that they gained through this fellowship. She had 33 grad students and 23 postdocs and many, many more people. So the importance of a role model, right? I learned how to dress. I learned how to exude confidence, to stand up straight, to be proud to be in the room where nobody looked like us. We were two women where most of the room would be men. We had our team though, and you can change the world just with that, is what she showed me. So to ensure we continue her legacy, like what research needs to be done. That's always what she was thinking about. What collaborations can be made and what policy needs the research, what research can we do to support that policy, right? And keep training that next generation of students. That was so important to her. Also trust the process, because sometimes you don't really see, you just have that bullet point, like make an atlas. Okay, I don't even know what that means for soil biodiversity, and it turned out great, right? Like I didn't really understand what was going to happen with that. Okay, so this is just like of the women that I interacted with her with in that 2 years that I was with her. I was only with her for really a year and 3/4. It wasn't long enough before I moved to the Netherlands. But these are all the folks that I have worked with with her over those last years. And obviously there would be way more. I forgot Monica on here from the FAO. She also is somebody who Diana worked with a lot. And it's just really cool. It was really cool to put this together. And then I was like, I bet Diana would be like, we don't have enough people from the Southern Hemisphere. We don't have enough people of color. And so just like she would say, is there a woman that we can invite? Is there a woman we can invite? Is there a woman that we haven't thought of? Like she was always pushing the boundaries of ensuring that we were more inclusive in who we invited to the table. I think I'm good on time. Okay. And so I really liked this quote that she gave when she won the Tyler Prize. We can't sit around and wait for more wildfires and more pollution and more landfill and more epidemics. We have to say we know enough right now and start working on all of these full force. And that's so very true. And yeah, she won the Tyler Prize when I was working with her. And she also got the Diana Day, that like South Dakota gave her a day. She didn't want us to talk about it. We were like, should we get you cupcakes? And she was like, get out of here. And it's funny because this is like the third or fourth talk that I've given about Diana, like in memory of her. And I just sort of can like imagine her being like, you guys talk about something else, like, which I love. I love having that in my head. And I'm like, haha, you have to accept it now. Okay, so like I said, the GSBI, I learned how to build a grassroots organization and put a network together for a purpose, which was bringing soil biodiversity to policy and making like a global impact and changes to policy with soil biodiversity. And so then when the not exciting politics were happening in 2015, 2016, I was living in Europe and it felt like I had no control. I mean, besides voting from Europe, like you don't really have control a lot of the time anyways. And together with my colleague, Jane Zelikova, we got really like activated. And we were like, we want to do something and push back against policy, the political climate that is pushing against science right now. And so we started putting together a group, and we started talking about how 47% of the workforce are women, and only 28% of the STEM workforce are women. So it's quite imbalanced, and only 1 in 10 folks working in science and engineering is a woman of color. And if we look at scientists and engineers and across, we have white men, white women, Asian men, Asian women, right? And then Black and Hispanic are a small proportion of those folks working in science. And we wanted to stand up and transform science to be more open, inclusive, and accessible. And this really, it's funny, like comparing the GSBI and 500 Women Scientists. It's two very different topics, but I used so much of what Diana taught me to build this organization. And actually the mission changed from this to then include by fighting racism, patriarchy, and oppressive social norms. So we changed our mission as we grew over the years. And a lot of our work is based on the idea that as a scientist, you go to the lab, you go to work with many different identities, and your identity in the lab and work can change. So maybe at a soil science conference, you really are noticing your gender because you're the only female in that workshop. Or maybe you think a lot about your sexuality or your ethnicity or your language if you're traveling, right? It really depends on what room you're in and who you're around, and what identity is brought forward. But we have a society where not all folks are able to bring their full self to the lab or work. And disability, race, sexuality can really be restrictive and influence how a person can be at work. And so to create an inclusive science, we would center on the experiences of the most marginalized among us, stay committed to justice, confront our own privilege, and remain open to learning and growing in this work. And Diana supported us from the very beginning. She was one of our very first and largest donors. She was giving monthly contributions to us. She would email and message me, check in, see how the organization was doing. In 2020, we had like over 200 active pods around the world. And what was really cool about this is depending on where we were, depending on where the pod was, they had different foci for what they were working on. And so our pod in Brazil actually is very active. So coincidentally, we have a lot of activity in Brazil right around this. And they were focusing on they had a different way of talking about things than we did in the United States, for example, or those in Europe or those in Asia had a different way of thinking about and talking about accessibility and inclusion for women in science. And so here's some of our leadership team. This is kind of an old photo back in 2018. And there is our new mission. And so in addition to bringing awareness to the inequities in science, we also published a number of papers using data, because we're nerdy scientists as well, and talking about how the future of ecology is collaborative, inclusive, and deconstructs biases. This was in response to a paper that published the top 100 papers in ecology, and there were only 2 women authors on that list. And so we pushed back and said, well, just because citations doesn't mean these are the only ecology papers to read. And then today, even this came out just this last year, queer and trans inclusive faculty hiring, a call for change. And so there's still every year really insightful, helpful papers come out helping folks transform science to be more inclusive and accessible. And so, like I said, we need to acknowledge the problems if you're going to make a change. So we need to acknowledge that there's racism and other forms of harassment in our society and also in science. We're not in a bubble. Acknowledge that there is a discrepancy between women in places of power and men in places of power. And acknowledge that when sexual harassment occurs in academia, still to this day, it didn't just go away just because we don't want to talk about it. So we have a pledge, and actually our leadership team just wrote a new pledge for 2024 because nothing exciting is happening in politics right now. And so if you are interested in thinking about how to make science open, inclusive, and accessible, and take action in your own community, which is what the organization is focusing on now, is what can you do in your own community to focus on making it more inclusive. go check out the pledge. It's online. And yeah, that's an example. Okay. So I just wanted to finish with a silly meme that I loved last fall. And I don't know if Diana would have loved this, but I love Mudang. And she's ungovernable, which I love. And so what does activism look like for you? Is it to be ungovernable? Hopefully a little bit, and to push back against the societal norms. And maybe you don't feel like you can do that. So maybe that just means donating or supporting the people that are pushing back against societal norms. And so with that, I want to say thank you and turn it over.
Our panelists to Peter Backlund, Peter, Kathy Galvin, Kelly Marrero, and Andre for being here. We'll have some time for questions and answers about the presentations, but I wanted to start with Kathy and Peter Backlund about some reflections of Diana's efforts to globalize CSU and bringing the globe to campus. And so starting with Kathy, share some of your thoughts on how Diana played a role in expanding and exposing our students and faculty to the international community, and how she was able to, sort of bring international leaders to CSU.
Well, thank you, Dennis. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Galvin. I'm a professor in the Anthropology and Geography department here at CSU, but I also am director of the Africa Center, which sits within the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. And this session and the whole symposium has been sponsored by international programs here at CSU. And that program has a commitment to what it calls comprehensive internationalization of the university. And I want to say a few words about Diana's contribution to that from the CSU side. From my perspective, we know, and it's been obvious today through Kelly and Andre, that Diana was a huge mentor of students and postdocs and really supported them in becoming great scientists, and particularly women in general. But she also encouraged and mentored faculty at CSU as well, including me. So under SOGES, there are two international centers, the Africa Center and the Global Biodiversity Center. And my center, the Africa Center, was started out as a global challenge research team. And those are teams of people across the university who come together to address some sort of challenge, a research challenge or some sort of challenge. And subsequently to that, we were funded by the president's office. Tony Frank at that time funded us to become the Africa Center. And we've been in existence for 10 years this year. After that, after Tony started funding us, it went to the provost's office, and we've been funded through the provost's office through SOGES. And we have Rick Miranda here, who was a chief contributor to the Africa Center for many, many years when he was provost. And today, through private donations, we've been able to support graduate students to go to Africa to do their research across the university. We've gotten about 15 scholarships funded through donors to do that work. So I just want to say that Diana was a huge mentor, but also a mentor to this initiative And she gave advice when it was needed, and sometimes when you didn't even ask for it. So that's just one example of her contributions to the international work here at CSU. And a number of people today have talked about these international initiatives. She held the prize for leading those. And as Vim has talked about, the Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, where she was science chair. She was also a member of the Restore Foundation based in Switzerland. She was on the Science Advisory Board in Germany and the African Soil Microbiology Project in Pretoria, South Africa, among many, many others. And when I was asked in 2016, I was asked to become a lead author of the International the Science Policy Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, their global assessment. And I didn't really know exactly what they did. And so I went to her and I asked for her advice. And she said, "You must do this. You have no choice." In no uncertain terms, she said, "You must get involved." And of course, that led to 3 years of my life being involved with that. So I just want to say I'll always value her wisdom, her advice. She helped so many people across our campus in our scientific and professional paths in the international arena. And for that, I'm very thankful. So thanks.
Yeah, if I can ask Peter Backlund, in looking at how Diana advanced sort of and legitimized working in the science policy interface, as well as thinking about, how she brought the globe to CSU, the world to CSU, sort of on those two aspects, in your work with her at SOJUS. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so a little bit like Andre, I think I came to CSU to work with Diana. She found me at a dinner at AAAS, actually a board meeting of AAAS, where I was there with a friend who was on the board, who sat me next to Diana on purpose. And we talked for like an hour at dinner, and then she said, "We have to have lunch the next day." And that was like the beginning of where she convinced me that I should apply for a position at CSU working for her. And she had to negotiate with me for 3 months about that, because I was absolutely convinced that in no way would I be competitive for this position. And she said, no, you're the right person. And it really, a lot of it had to do with our shared interest in trying to bring science to policy, and the kind of reverse of that, explain the importance of scientists and motivate our scientific colleagues to become involved in policy. So she was very supportive of that. And you heard several references to assessment in the talks that went on here. And I do think back to several really interesting conversations that we had. She was a major force behind this global soil biodiversity assessment. But when that first kind of came up, she was a little bit hesitant about it, actually. And I remember a number of conversations in her office where she was like, I'm not really sure we should do this. And I realized later that she was in the process of kind of just going over all the pros and cons and talking herself into it. I'm sure she was already determined to do it, but she just wanted to thoroughly discuss all the different ways it could go wrong, and what was wrong with the process, and how hard it is to work with the FAO. And, if anybody who's worked with the UN organization knows that there are special challenges with that, but there's also no substitute for the UN and what it does. And she was particularly concerned about the schedule. But, when I listened to Kelly's talk, I just thought that was the Diana that I knew, because she had all these deep understanding of the challenge, and still just dove in head first and went after it. And so it was very inspiring to me, the way that she stayed committed to that kind of activity. And she was very supportive of my continued involvement in a number of assessment projects. I had a big one that was underway when I came to CSU, and I was like, gee, I've got this major time commitment. And she's like, no, you have to do that. Kind of the same thing that we just heard from Kathy. She said, you have to do this. And we kept doing it, and it was a big success. So that, you know, she was great at that. And I think she set a very powerful example, both for her peers, but particularly for younger scientists, of the value of engagement and of bringing your science to the world and showing that that was not just possible, but desirable and important. And, you know, she's an inspiration to me in that regard to this day. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the internationalization of CSU, and I think that Diana played a role in that. And it's so appropriate that we're having this symposium here as part of the international symposium, because the first week I was here, she took me to some big event that Jim Cooney organized, you know, it was a big dinner thing. And I immediately became enmeshed. I had no idea how large CSU's international footprint was at the time. And then I came to realize over time that Diana herself played a role in establishing that footprint. And in our office, frequently it was, you know, we talked a lot about the students and her scientific peers and the other professors here at CSU. We also had an incredible series of resident or visiting professors that came in to visit with us. And we had people from Mongolia, from Spain, from Italy, from Brazil, I mean, it was just astonishing, the parade from Africa. You know, it seemed like every few months I would come in and there'd be some new international person occupying a cube or an office in our space that I didn't even know and I'd never heard of, and then came to learn, oh my goodness, they're doing so much work all around the world. So she just had this web of colleagues and collaborators that she built up, and I think you could see that most powerfully in what Peter talked about with and Wim with those statistics from the GSBI and the number of people and the way that just exploded from you know, a significant organization to just an astonishing organization of thousands of scientists around the world, all united around this vision that really, you know, Diana and her peers that founded that had of engaged science for the betterment of humanity and for better decision making. And you know, it was a marvelous thing to experience firsthand.
And Kelly, I was amazed or intrigued by your connection about how you learned from Diana to build, you know, the GSBI, but then be able to apply that to 500 Women's, because in showing that you have these nodes all around the world, she must be proud of that as well. And so what do you think her advice to us now would be to be more active, or, you know, how do we continue bringing in the young, bright minds into these activities? And your group is, you know, helping lead us in that direction.
I mean, yeah, Diana was very much like acknowledging what the challenges were. She was really thoughtful, just like you said, like she understood, she wanted something, but then would take a step back and look at it 360. And yeah, when she identified a challenge, like, do we have enough women on this panel, right? It was as simple as saying it out loud and then finding a woman, right? She didn't see it as a challenge anymore. It's just like you identify it and then you do it. And so it's her advice now. Whew. I mean, I think she would still be fired up. I feel like Andre could address this better than I could, because you've had more conversations about politics, I think, with her. Yeah, stay fired up, but also like keep your focus on what you want done. So like pick what you're gonna focus on. You don't need to do all the things. I mean, she did all the things, but like for her advice for us would be like, what is it that you want to get done, and do that. Like you don't need to get somebody else's work done. They can do that.
I can add a bit to that. Just she was on the first time around 2016. I'm talking about, right? So I was just talking to some folks about that. In terms of my immigration status, I was a lot vulnerable to the things that were going on. And at the time, I was part of. There was something at CSU when Tony Frank was president. They called the International Presidential Fellows, and I was part of the cohort for one of the years. And as a group, we decided to do something about it. And to do something about it was we wrote a piece, and we want to just emphasize how much international scholars contribute to science in this country, right? So we had numbers about, the proportion of Nobel Prizes in the US, they're actually from abroad. The proposal of NSF awardees and all that type of thing. And then students as well, how much of international tuition contribute to universities. We had all that, we wrote a piece about that. And that took a lot of time. And then we started trying to publish that. And we were hitting the wall all the time. We would send to one of these high profile journals and I was getting mad with that. And I remember seeing Diana at the same time, she was supportive of what we were trying to do. But she understood how vulnerable my situation was. And she was protective of that, right? So she was, at some point she came to me and she made me realize that, okay, publishing that had real world implications for me that could really harm my pathway through science. And she was like, maybe it's time you focus on the things you were doing. Let the noise go a little bit. Maybe don't get too involved. Do your science. I think that's the best contribution you can do. And the other things, people like me and others, we can do some of that. And we can, she thought in terms of fair expectations, right? What are the expectations for someone at her profile to advocate to things like me being an immigrant scientist here being harmed by some sort of policy. And so she became protective to her mentees at the same time that she would stimulate us to do things like, building a new movement like Kelly did and trying to publish the piece that we were trying to do. We never did it, by the way. I still have that file in my computer, never got published, so.
Maybe now.
Maybe now, it's still time.
So I'm going to open up the floor for questions, comments from you all. I'm hoping that there'll be a microphone. As you think about your questions, maybe I could ask Peter de Ruyter to, sort of reflect on, the continued impact that Diana has with things like the FAO and, the science policy aspects of what's happening to recognition of biodiversity. I think those examples were really very important ones, but how do we advance that, in the coming days ahead?
Well, I think that if I look at the FAO, it's there. It is implemented.
Okay.
It will not go away anymore. At the moment, it is recognized by so many people that it is something that is part of FAO. It will not go away. In fact, it did the job. I think it's implemented. It's adopted. So I'm very positive, optimistic that work is really well done. And of course, NetSop and these boards, they will miss her extremely, but it's done and it's there. And so I think we should worry about that things will go down as long as people recognize that it is important. And there's now so many no, I'm very optimistic about that. No, seriously. Good work done.
Yeah. I think you also mentioned how when she saw opportunities, that it was important to actually take time and pay attention to those opportunities.
Yeah, pardon. The aspect of take time. Now, I'm only an international colleague of hers, so I've never worked with her, so I don't know the precise. So I should be careful with making generalizations. And I know she worked extremely hard. I think too hard. She went for a sabbatical to the Netherlands, and I remember that we were thinking, well, what shall we do with Diana during the weekends? And we had this and this and this. Nothing. We had about half a day to Utrecht, and the rest, all the weekends, she was at the office, and that's what. But she still could find time to say yes. And that is something that I think it's very important. We are all busy, and you have all your full schedule, but sometimes also we say in mentoring programs, say something comes by, you get a question you like to do you have time to do that? So always be prepared that if you think, hey, here's something important I should do, that you can say yes. And apparently Diana was so busy, but she has still room that if an opportunity arises, she could say yes and step in. And of course, she had also she's the person that there are thousands reasons to say no, but she could find a reason to say yes, but also having the time to do so. And that's a little bit the impression I have with her, and also one of the reasons why she made the impact she made.
So we have Vim on the Zoom as well. So if you have questions for Vim, that's fine. We'll get him to respond. But are there any questions from you all right now before I keep on asking mine? I guess one of the aspects that a lot of you spoke to is that she was well connected. She had, I think, on any question or problem, she could know the right people to call upon to actually, she was an activator. She was able to bring teams together from really a broad set of, problem sets. So I guess comment on how she was able to maintain all these connections. I mean, I guess she was an email fiend. I mean, it was great that you kept some of those emails. But and
she was so nice. She was very nice.
Yeah.
So the people like to stay connected with her. She was a very nice person to work with, and I think that is also important to keep your connections, right?
I also think she enjoyed networking other people. So if there was some sort of social occasion, she was talking to go, oh, you must meet blah, blah, blah over here, and then leave you two alone and to go and chat. So she was a networker, a supreme networker.
Yeah.
And to the theme of this event on international work, right? She was very good at work on international settings. That's not an easy thing to do. Not every scientist is good at that. She was a master. She would really be able to go to somewhere in South America, in Africa, and talk to the people, and it put even the language barrier to the side, and find a way right there to communicate at least the main points and make progress on that. So she was always focused on what needs to be done. And she understood that it was important to have people from all over the globe on the table. And she was very driven by that. And I think she was a master of bringing together these global collaborations and work internationally.
And she was good at opening doors for, all of you, for me and many in this room. And I don't know, it just seems like the way that she was so gracious about introductions, the way that, that's how I got to really know Tom Lovejoy really well, and Senator Wirth, and getting connected with here on campus and what have you. And so I guess, do you have any thoughts on, so what was your best introduction that?
I have a story about that. It was very early during my time here at CSU. Every year when the Sorges external board was about to meet, right? So one time she sent me to the airport to pick up some people. I didn't really know who those people were. And I found myself driving my car with Tom Lovejoy and Rob Jackson. And I'm like, what should I say now? I didn't know what to talk about. So I just let them talk, and here and there would make a small contribution to the conversation. But it was really good. And then after that, actually with Tom, I became connected with him because it was during the time that we were doing the work in Amazonia. So one of the last messages that I exchanged with him was we were drinking a beer by the Amazon River, and the beer was called Amazon beer. So I took a picture, sent to him, and with me and Diana there. So yeah, many stories of these occasions.
Anybody else? Okay, great.
So I think before we are getting too sweet in our comments, I also want to mention this. Kelly is laughing now, but when Kelly came to my group, she entered my office and asked, "Can I have 5 minutes?" I said, "Well, you can just have more time." But she was so used to be very short and fast and really sharp and just coming in with a question or so and then just leave the room. And I thought, gosh, you have been cultured very, very, how do you say that, tough by Diana in those days. And I want to make to mention something. So I've been in scope workshop with Diana, and we have been working on a book. And I remember that there was an email going around that if Diana would come off the ice, then we really have to start working because she would be outraged if we would not deliver the chapters and so on and so on. So that is also Diana, that she could be really just using the whip and make sure that everybody was working. So I just want to contribute this to, because else we're not talking about a saint. So that's one thing. The other thing is, yeah, sorry, I'm Dutch, so we always are a bit blunt in these things. The other thing is that talking about the legacy, this is what I'm thinking about. And at this moment, so I happen to be in a position where Diana has been in at NREL as well to lead the institute. And how to make impact. That's the thing that we are thinking about now. And this is also, so how can we make sure that the legacy just remains impactful and that we are not sort of drifting away and talking about soil biodiversity without just making it do its job. So any ideas there? Kelly, for example, the new generation, how are you going to do that?
Actually, okay. I don't actually know if I have a good answer, but I know what we would have done if I was working with Diana. We would put together a group and with the specific prompt of what needs to happen next, and we would get everyone's answer, and then we would synthesize that and have that answer, and then we would say, okay, we're going forward with this. Because just like, yeah, I said, like, I had these bullet points, like we need an atlas, we need an assessment, but those didn't just like, she didn't just make that up out of nowhere. Just like she didn't make up all the other things. Like she thought about it, and she would always say, like, we need to get a group. We had like, as I'm sitting here today, I'm realizing I worked on so many projects, like the biodiversity center that we had at SOGIS, yeah, and the board meeting, like we had all these projects, but we would always synthesize afterward, like what were the main take home points. And so, and going back to your question, Dennis, she would do the same thing. Like she started like the SOGIS fellows, right? Because she had done the Leopold, she was a Leopold fellow, and she had learned so much from that, and she wanted to give that to people. I think if she would say, what do our young scientists, graduate students and postdocs need next? Maybe they're getting enough training in science policy and communication, but are there tools that they will need going forward in this current environment? And she would put together her group of people and ask some other people, who else do you think would have a good idea? And then we would create probably a course based on their feedback. Anyway, so I just thought of that while Wim was talking. I don't know. I don't have a good answer, Wim, but yeah, 5 minutes. She was efficient. She was really efficient. That was why 5-minute meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought of this as well. She went to many international meetings, and she was probably one of the most well-traveled scientists at CSU, and she used to win prizes for doing that. But she'd come back very excited because so-and-so that she met at this meeting gave her an idea, and then she would get extremely excited and say, well, we need to do that here. And so she was always full of ideas, partly because of the interactions that she made that she had internationally.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up a little bit on Wim's observation, which I thought, Diana was efficient. She was, I would venture to say, she was famous for being like a really scary meeting chair. Like I can't tell you how many times when I would be, when I myself would be traveling around and people would ask me, where are you now? And I'd say, I'm at CSU. I work in, you know, in the School of Global Environmental Sustainability with Diana Wall. And they'd say, what's it like to work for Diana Wall? Because their main experience had been being shushed at a meeting when they were going too long, you know. Even our staff meetings, you know, everybody, I think within 1 or 2 weeks would learn, like, you do not want to drone on in a SOJA staff meeting ever for anything, because she just wanted to get the meeting over and get it done. So she was a very interesting combination. I often thought of her as kind of like this very charming Southern lady with a backbone of like stainless steel. You know, she was a very interesting combination of being very soft-spoken and yet very, very authoritative when necessary. And, you know, if we can all be frank, that's what it takes to move a lot of scientists along in a process. Scientists aren't the easiest group of cats to herd and to team up into these things. And so I think it's often overlooked, this ability to put together teams and not just put them together, but keep them going for a period of, you know, months or even years was really quite astonishing on her part. And to be able to do that cross-culturally and cross-nationally was even more impressive. So it never ceases to amaze me when I reflect back on what it was like to work with her.
And let me just add a reflection of my own. When Diana arrived here in the early 90s as director of the Natural Resource Ecology Laboratory, she really did change the culture of how we viewed, you know, sort of women in science. And, you know, she and Kathy and Jill had, you know, a workshop about this issue with a lot of the federal agencies as well, as trying to really, how do you, you know, change the demographics, and how do you, you know, bring in and support women in science. And that was really important. You know, and she insisted on, you know, maintaining or changing the culture at NREL. And I think she did that within the College of Natural Resources as well, and looking at how she supported the research endeavors, you know, within the NREL and within the college. And, you know, her ability to tie into international programs like the International Geosphere Program, where, you know, she was good buddies with Thomas Roswell. They, you know, they helped arrange me to go to Stockholm and things. So, and then her role at NSF, the 3 years that she was there, it was really valuable as well. So she's did a lot for the Colorado State University, you know, from the very day she arrived, and this kind of maintaining. And the other thing that she does, and I think she, you know, we really respected Diana for, she would let loose, right? She would, she would have these little hall parties at the lab, and you know, get people to build community. And I think, you know, what you said, Peter, about people liked her because, you know, they saw that she worked hard, but she also played hard, you know, just to build community and connectivity. And so I remember, you know, the Halloween parties she would hold and things like that were just phenomenal. I guess any other reflections, comments from you all? Yeah, there's a microphone floating around somewhere, or
Thank you, Dennis. For those of you who don't know me, I'm George Taylor. I'm an interloper from Boulder. There are a couple of other dimensions that might be of interest to people here. I first met Diana in 2011 when my wife and I moved from the Shenandoah Valley to Boulder. And it just so happened that by some fluke, we had gotten a contract. I had gotten a contract with a couple of colleagues of mine to do the first ever external review of the World Resources Institute. And Diana was on the board. And one of the things I wanted to do as the team leader of this venture was to meet with as many board members as I could. So I came up here and met her and was just absolutely entranced. And that led to various things that we don't need to talk about. There are a couple of other dimensions. Obviously, the soil biodiversity work was her absolute passion. And I'm delighted that we learned so much more about it today. There were these other efforts that she was like a mother hen in some senses. She incubated a lot of different things. The Africa Center is one, the biodiversity, what is it called? A center? Global biodiversity, whatever it's called. There are a couple of others that may seem not to be directly connected to the international theme, but I think they are. And the two people that I was going to hand things off to have just left. One is Rick Miranda, and I was going to ask him to say something about the Energy Institute. That was all, you know, Diana sort of helped them figure out what they were going to do. And then I was going to pass the mic to Dean Sue and talk about One Health, because that's another thing, you know, that she helped to get up and running. And then I was going to pass it to Alita, and Alita could talk about the sustainability dinners. I mean, there's just all these other dimensions of this wonderful woman. And yes, some of them, many of them are international in different ways, but they're also linking out from CSU to the Fort Collins community. Thanks.
Any other comments?
I agree. There were so many dimensions. That's why I like being back at CSU. I'm like, oh, I remember we worked on this and on this, and there were
Yeah.
so many things I got to observe being her postdoc and her incubating all those projects. Yeah.
Yes, there's a question from the,
Yep, I have a question from Diana's sister, Anne. Vim, you seemed like you were a little surprised when you went back and looked at the history of GSBI. Could you speak to the importance of ensuring that the history of organizations like GSBI is not lost, and why it's important for someone to keep track of it?
who would like to answer that one?
Vim, if,
The answer to me.
yes.
So, yeah, well, actually, my presentation was a bit messy. I think Kelly would have done a far better job than I did, but actually, it was also a bit because I couldn't see my presentation, so sorry for that. But when I was putting this all together, there were several things that blew my mind. One is, I'm very bad in keeping pictures, but everything was on the internet and everything was organized on the website. I just took screenshots. And then when I went through it and I thought, gosh, you know, as a boy, you read these books of people who just do everything that you have never thought about. And so, and for me, setting up the GSBI looked a bit like that, you know. So now I was made aware that Kelly really made it to Rio +20. So that's good to know that. I thought she was stuck somewhere in an airport. But the two went to this meeting, and Diana went on stage, and she just was there, you know. And this is interesting to see that quite some people just ask me, "Oh, what can I do? I'm just alone or whatever." Well, GSBI learns that we can do a lot. You can go to any meeting, to any stage, and just go there and just say what you think and get things in movement. So going back, and also what struck me was that all the things that we rolled out in the years to come, or the years after the setup of GSBI, that we have thought about this. So we had this list, and at some stage I saw this movie Bucket List, and I said, so I think we have our bucket list completed, isn't it? So we have to think about something new. But actually at the start we thought, okay, we should do this. In 2012 in London, we made this list. And so yeah, some determination. And I think that, and also the combination of people. So Diana was always just, well, in London, in the parliament, they would say chief whip. And then she used Richard and Johan and me to come up with ideas, and then she sorted them out and said, okay, we are going to do this. And I think so, making good combinations, that's also very productive. So yeah, I'm talking a lot. I hope I gave something of an answer.
Well, thank you, Wim. I think we're going to close the panel discussion now. I really want to thank the panelists and the speakers and your participation. We have closing remarks now from Chancellor Tony Frank, a good friend of ours, and looking forward to his remarks.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. As Dennis just said, I was asked to make some closing remarks and share some personal thoughts about Diana. To kick off the reception was the way it was phrased, and I can hear Diana's voice in my head saying, that is a lame reception if you need a guy in a suit talking to kick it off. There's a lot of truth to that, so I'll keep my remarks short. Diana and I met as associate deans for research for our colleges back in the last millennium. I was new to the role, and Diana knew what she was doing, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that relationship was going to characterize the next 30 years that she and I knew each other. For example, I was a pretty new provost when President Penley asked me if I could hire anybody I wanted to head the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. Who would I hire? And I didn't really have to hesitate. I knew someone who knew what they were doing. And I was, as I recall, a pretty new president when in the middle of a pretty good snowstorm, I took a very nice bottle of wine over to Diana's house, along with the news that she had been selected as a university distinguished professor. And Diana looked at the bottle and went back into the kitchen and came back out with a different one and said, I'm not going to waste that on you. And proving again, she knew what she was doing. And I guess over those next 30 years, I can't pull up a memory of Diana that doesn't include either a wonderful dinner or an amazing international trip or her love of Antarctica. I can literally hear the clamor in a really crowded DC restaurant and catching the little twinkle in Diana's eye across the table as we listen to our colleagues on the Council of Scientific Society Presidents have a really heated debate about whether an athlete could actually go on a hot streak or whether that was just a statistical anomaly. And I can, as I sit here remembering it, I can feel the stuffiness of an overly warm conference room at the University of Nairobi right after lunch, big lunch, when we were severely jet lagged and the PowerPoint was going on, and Kathy Galvin and Diana and I kept watching each other because our colleagues had dropped off one by one into a very sound sleep. And I think all of us were wondering who was going to be next, like we were some, benign academic version of Agatha Christie's, and then there was one. And I can almost smell the sea standing on the deck of a ferry crossing the Cook Strait with Diana, with her talking about Antarctica and Kentucky Wildcat basketball mixed into it. That's in the past, though, for all of us. And I was reminded of it literally at the start of this week. I got an email, and in a couple of weeks, I'm going to moderate a panel at an international biomedical research conference in Texas, literally on the doorstep of our nation's current measles outbreak. And of the 3 panel members that I'll be moderating, one is a federal scientist from DC who can no longer travel to attend the conference, so he'll be there by Zoom. One is from Europe who doesn't feel comfortable traveling to America at this moment in time, so he'll be there by Zoom. The third is retired. He was the head of the pipeline project for the CDC's child vaccine supply program. And this email came to me as the moderator, urging me to make sure that I kept politics out of our scientific panel. And you did the same thing I did. You played it back in your mind a second time to go, really? Is that what you're talking? And I thought that Diana would love the rich, delicious irony that dripped from off of that email. And that was useful for me because it made me picture Diana in this moment in time, the Diana of past and in today's moment. And for all of us who knew Diana, at least to my mind, there were 4 things that really characterized her. Her absolute love of science, the fact that she was always striving to find a better way to speak science to policymakers, to non-scientists. The fact that she was willing to speak truth to power. You got to trust me on that one. She really was. And the fact that she always wanted to open the door for the next generation of scientists, particularly female scientists. And I think that's how I'm going to honor and celebrate and remember Diana in this moment in time. Even in this sort of challenging moment, I'm not going to stop speaking science. And although I may have to swallow hard sometimes, I'm going to try and remain in respectful conversation with people about science. And when need be, I think all of us should speak truth to power about science. And I know that all of us will do everything in our power to keep those doors open, to say to the next generation of scientists, you're wanted, you're needed, there are better days ahead. This is still a wonderful profession and a wonderful career. And we hope that you'll dedicate your lives to it and get back from what it's given to so many of us. So when I do each of those things, I'm going to remember my friend. And when I remember my friend, I'm going to smile. And I'll remember one other thing about Diana as I close out here. In all those years that I knew her, I don't think I ever saw her at a reception without a glass of wine in her hand and a smile on her face. And I hope that we are all about to imitate her in that. Thank you all for being here.
So this ends this portion of the evening celebration. We do have a reception set up for you. And so please mingle, interact, reflect on what Diana meant to you and to us. And so please help yourself.